Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'm Hale. So a few weeks ago, the Lord spoke to me again about the upcoming election. While receiving this prophetic word, I saw Trump and heard an obstructionist, meaning that instead of operating in conjunction with the Lord's will, Trump was actually operating against it. These words were confirmed by Trump at his town hall meeting the other night, where he said, referring to strict abortion laws in some states, too tough, and those are going to be redone. Clearly, Trump is not going to leave the abortion issue up to the states, confirming what the Lord had said to me back in April of this year. The link for that word is in the description box below. In fact, if elected, Trump is planning to expand abortion in red states to what, in his mind, is a more reasonable approach. What happened in Arizona with the overturning of the state ban on abortion after Trump exerted his influence is a perfect example of what we can expect from a Trump presidency. Even with Trump's obvious pro-abortion agenda, many Christians still believe he's God's pick for president. We have prophets comparing Trump to Cyrus or Nebuchadnezzar. Some Christians have even compared him to King David. Now, the issue with this type of comparison is that each of those individuals were selected not because of who they were, but because the Lord saw that through them he could bring about his higher purposes. And since God is no respecter of persons, it's never about the individual themselves, but about the accomplishment of his will. It's about the question, can the Lord advance his agenda through that person? Driving abortion out of America is currently the Lord's main objective, as life is the central concept through which all others emanate. God has spoken this ideal with several prophetic voices. Though we recently saw the overturning of Roe in the fight over life, the full battle has yet to be won. Some have said the Dobbs decision didn't go far enough when the Supreme Court kicked the abortion issue back to the states. However, as in every situation, we need to seek the Lord's perspective and not rely on our own understanding to assess the battlefield. The Lord reminded me of a vision I received back in March of this year. In it, I was taken to the spiritual battlefield over abortion, where I saw the nation's capital. In front of it stood a thick line of demonic forces, acting like a wall. Suddenly, a fracture appeared in the line, which caused the enemy's forces to divide into smaller factions and then flee to other states, joining the pockets of resistance already established in that spiritual terrain. The Lord showed me that the fracture was the moment Roe was overturned, and showed me what it looked like in the spiritual campaign being waged over abortion. I then heard him say, divide and conquer, as this is the strategy he was now employing, where these pockets of resistance would be much easier to defeat. And the Lord said, what was meant for evil, I shall turn for good. A reference to Genesis 50:20. What we've seen over the last year or so is an effort by Christian influencers, both pastors, theologians, and political commentators alike, to sway the body of Christ to accept a choice that is an obviously compromised one. The strongest argument they propose is that it's not only okay, but necessary to choose the lesser of two evils. Here's what some of them have said. Kamala Harris is unquestionably more extreme than Trump, and therefore they're convinced and want to convince us that more babies will die if she wins. But if we deeply consider their reasoning, we have to ask, what proof exists to support this claim? There isn't any. This is simply speculation. And if we step back for a minute to examine the situation, it's likely that more abortions will occur under Trump. Why? Well, think about it. If Trump is elected, the red states are more apt to play ball with him and in turn compromise on their abortion limits. They would see Trump as an ally and be much more likely to comply with his wishes. Remember that Trump has already convinced the RNC to change the party platform to suit his agenda, which has been done to the utter disregard of the traditional Christian stance on abortion and LGBTQ issues, to name just a few. If Kamala wins, because there would be a natural repugnance toward her agenda and the promotion of her ultra-liberal ideals, major pushback would likely occur. Red states would stiffen their opposition to her efforts to implement her policies. Doesn't that make sense? The Lord likened the election of Trump to that of a Trojan horse. When we understand what happened in the story of Troy, we see a parallel to our situation today. After nearly a decade of battle, the people misjudged the condition of the battlefield. Thinking they had won, they were tricked into opening the gates in the formerly impenetrable city walls, which ushered the enemy in, ultimately leading to Troy's destruction. The lesson for us is when we compromise with evil, whether on a personal or national level, it opens the door for darkness to spread, allowing the enemy to gain a position of greater influence over our lives. The most effective and truly best option is to abstain, to refuse to partner with the agenda of darkness and make a stand against it. Sadly, that choice is garnering a lot of flack from the body, with pastors and other Christian leaders not only attempting to shame believers into voting and stating it is our duty to vote, intimating that unless we vote, we are not only being disobedient and sinful, but will usher in calamity for our nation. The Lord doesn't need Donald Trump to make America great again. What he is looking for is a people who won't compromise with evil or bow to a political system. He wants those who will step outside the political kingdom of this world and put their full faith and trust in him. The battle has never been against flesh and blood, but has always been against spiritual powers. We must abstain in order to retain the spiritual high ground, our spiritual authority given to us through Jesus. And then I heard this. Who's to say what the results will be of the upcoming election? For surely has the outcome yet to be determined. So though some have claimed it to be my will that Trump wins, still are they uncertain that he will actually achieve victory. For these prophets have been unable to discern the final results, and thus cannot accurately predict what they have not seen. See then is the outcome of the upcoming election intentionally vague, for indeed have I left this decision up to the will of the people, as I shall not attempt to influence the results in any way. As such, is a Trump victory only a possibility and not a predetermined event. Thus should it be understood by the elect that Trump is no longer my chosen vessel, for surely does he stand in direct opposition to my will. That being said, however, throughout the current company of prophets, the prevailing thought is that Trump, despite his act of open rebellion, is still the one I have appointed to lead America for the next 4 years. Thus do these of my own think I have overlooked Trump's defiant stance, and so are encouraging fellow believers to do the same. Yet what these of my own have not rightly discerned is that Trump was only my chosen vessel for as long as through him I was able to accomplish my will. However, that is no longer possible, as Trump has chosen to stand directly opposed to me. Therefore, on my side, is he no different than his opponent, for both are pushing the enemy's evil agenda. Then those believers who still think my goal is to see Trump reelected, and thereby should offer him their unwavering support, are operating under a false assumption. For I have clearly stated that those who are mine should refuse to participate in the upcoming election cycle, as neither Trump nor his opponent should be considered viable options. So then any voices that claim it is my desire to see Trump win are speaking from their flesh. For I tell you now that he has opted to travel down an alternate course from the one I had laid, and as such has he lost my stamp of approval. And since he has refused to correct his heading, a full divergence has occurred, for he has completely shifted direction so that his aim no longer coincides with my own. For surely has he become an obstructionist, as he shall continue to use his position of power to influence state legislators to enact pro-abortion legislation. So though he has said, leave it up to the states, that is not his intention, for he desires to win elections, even if the cost is more innocent human lives in the process. Even still, should Trump win, though he shall not receive my endorsement, I shall honor the will of the American people, and thus recognize him as their rightful president. However, it will then be through another that my will for America shall be accomplished. Thus even now am I preparing to raise up another vessel, one whose heart is much more pliable, for it is not filled with arrogance and the desire for vengeance. Hear me then, dear ones. Do not listen to any voice that implies or outright states that it is your duty as a believer to vote for Trump because it is my will that you do so, for that is a falsity. Do not succumb, therefore, to those tactics of fear and shame, for indeed is abstention the order I have given. Then do I say, hold your ground, for you who are refusing to participate in the upcoming election are actually operating in obedience. Thus do I say again, abstain. Thanks again for joining me today.